On June 10, 2025, Build a Rocket Boy launched MindsEye, the first game from Leslie Benzies, the man who produced Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, San Andreas, 4, and 5. 8 years in development, £233 million invested. More money than Rockstar spent making Grand Theft Auto 5. Launch weekend arrived. Concurrent players on Steam, under 250. Within 1 month, that number dropped to under 20. Metacritic score, 38. The lowest rated game of 2025. PlayStation began issuing refunds within 3 days. Sponsored Twitch streams were canceled. Reviews called it relentlessly dull, a broken mess, the worst game of the year. 1 month after launch, nearly 300 employees, 75% of the studio's workforce, received layoff notices. In a staff video call, Benzies didn't apologize. He blamed internal and external saboteurs and promised to hunt down the disloyal employees. 3 months later, 93 former employees signed an open letter condemning studio leadership. The workers' unions sued Build a Rocket Boy for mishandling layoffs. This is the story of how the producer behind one of the most successful entertainment products in history spent £233 million, proving that pedigree means nothing without collaboration, and how ego, micromanagement, and refusing to accept responsibility created 2025's biggest gaming disaster. To understand how MindsEye destroyed Leslie Benzies' reputation, you need to understand what Leslie Benzies built. In 1999, Leslie Benzies joined a small Scottish studio called DMA Design, which had just been acquired by Rockstar Games. The studio was working on something ambitious, a 3D open-world crime game called Grand Theft Auto 3. Benzies started as a programmer. By the end of development, he was a producer. Grand Theft Auto 3 launched in October 2001 and changed gaming forever. It sold 14.5 million copies and created the template for every open-world game that followed. Leslie Benzies was part of that foundation. Then came Vice City in 2002. Benzies was producer. 17.5 million copies sold. 95 on Metacritic. San Andreas in 2004. Benzies was producer. 27.5 million copies. One of the highest-rated games of all time. Grand Theft Auto 4 in 2008. Benzies was lead producer. 25 million copies in the first 5 weeks. 98 on Metacritic. The highest-rated game of its generation. Then came the masterpiece. Grand Theft Auto 5 launched September 17, 2013. Leslie Benzies was vice president of development and producer. The game made $1 billion in 3 days, faster than any entertainment product in history. It became the second best-selling game ever made. To date, it's generated over $8 billion in revenue. By 2015, Leslie Benzies wasn't just a producer, he was Rockstar North's president. He'd spent 17 years helping build one of the most valuable franchises in entertainment. Industry insiders credited him as one of the key creative forces behind GTA's success. But behind the scenes, tensions were rising. Benzies took a sabbatical in September 2014. When he tried to return in April 2015, Rockstar told him his role was no longer available. In January 2016, he filed a lawsuit against Rockstar and Take-Two Interactive, claiming $150 million in unpaid royalties. The lawsuit was eventually settled in 2018, details confidential. But the split was acrimonious. Benzies left Rockstar feeling he hadn't received the credit he deserved. He wanted to prove he could succeed on his own terms. In 2017, he founded Build a Rocket Boy in Edinburgh, Scotland. The studio's name came from a childhood memory, something optimistic, ambitious. Benzies assembled a team of industry veterans, former Rockstar developers, ex-Ubisoft designers, talent from across the games industry. By 2024, Build a Rocket Boy employed 448 people across multiple studios. They'd raised £233 million in funding, one of the most successful fundraising campaigns for an independent studio in history. Investors believed in Benzies. The man who helped make GTA was building something new. The vision was called Everywhere. In the late 2010s, the games industry was obsessed with a new concept: user-generated content platforms. Minecraft had proven players wanted to build. Roblox was printing money. Fortnite's creative mode was exploding. The dream was simple: create the tools, let players make the content, build a platform that could last forever. Everywhere was Build a Rocket Boy's answer. An ambitious game creation platform where players could build their own experiences, share them, and play in a connected universe. Think Roblox meets GTA meets Ready Player One. Benzies described it as a multi-world game experience that would blend action, exploration, adventure, and creativity. The pitch attracted major investment. By 2024, Build a Rocket Boy had raised over £233 million from venture capital firms and investors betting on Benzies' track record. That's more than Rockstar spent developing the entire Grand Theft Auto 5, a game that cost an estimated £170 million and generated $8 billion. But Everywhere had a problem. It was too ambitious. Years into development, there was no clear release date, no playable demo for the public, no proof the vision could work. In 2023, Build a Rocket Boy made a decision. They would create MindsEye, a standalone game set within the Everywhere platform, a proof of concept, a cinematic action-adventure game that would showcase the technology while giving players something to actually play. MindsEye was described as a narrative thriller set in Red Rock, a futuristic desert metropolis inspired by Las Vegas. Players would control Jacob Diaz, a former soldier with a mysterious neural implant called the MindsEye, suffering from memory loss and flashbacks. The game promised 20 hours of story, exploration, and action. The marketing emphasized Benzies' pedigree. From the producer of Grand Theft Auto, every trailer, every press release, every interview reminded people this was made by the man who helped create one of the most successful franchises in entertainment. The game was announced with sleek CGI trailers showing futuristic cityscapes, intense action sequences, and dramatic storytelling. It looked expensive, polished, professional. Build a Rocket Boy promised MindsEye would be the first chapter of an episodic series, with future installments exploring different time periods and parts of the universe, all connected by an overarching narrative about AI, technology, greed, and corruption. IO Interactive Partners signed on as publisher. Release was set for June 10, 2025 on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X/S, and PC. Behind the scenes, developers were worried. According to interviews with former employees, Benzies never decided what game he wanted to make. There was no coherent direction. The project shifted constantly. Entire missions were removed weeks before launch. Features were added and cut based on Benzies' daily feedback. Developers created a term for this: Leslie tickets. When Benzies played the game and found something he didn't like, a bug, a mission pacing issue, an animation, anything, he would create a Leslie ticket. Former lead data analyst Ben Newbon explained, "It didn't matter what else you were doing, what else was being worked on. The Leslie ticket had to be taken care of." These tickets went straight to the top of the priority list, overriding schedules, disrupting workflows, and forcing teams to constantly pivot. Developers said most of the feedback they presented to management was ignored and just never actioned. As the launch date approached, Build a Rocket Boy entered crunch mode. Most staff worked extra hours, unpaid, with promises of time off after release. One employee named Marg later told the BBC that the team expected MindsEye to receive a negative reception. They knew the game wasn't ready, but they shipped it anyway. May 27, 2025, 2 weeks before launch, early preview codes went out to select media and content creators. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Previews described MindsEye as a broken mess. Performance issues plagued all platforms. The PlayStation 5 Pro couldn't maintain stable frame rates. The game was locked at 30 frames per second with no option for 60 frames per second. Graphical glitches were everywhere. Characters with melted faces, textures popping in and out, lighting bugs making scenes unplayable. That same day, co-CEO Mark Gerhard made a startling claim in a Discord Q&A. He alleged the negative pre-release coverage was 100% a paid campaign by a third party, working to trash the game and the studio. He claimed there was a concerted effort involving sponsored bot campaigns to damage MindsEye's reputation before it even launched. Build a Rocket Boy provided no evidence for these claims. On June 10, 2025, MindsEye launched. Launch day on Steam, the game peaked at under 250 concurrent players. For context, Concord, one of 2024's biggest flops, peaked at 697 on launch day. MindsEye couldn't even reach that. Reviews arrived. Metacritic, 38 out of 100. PC, the lowest rated game of 2025. IGN. MindsEye feels outdated, with uninspired mission design and technical issues that make it hard to recommend. PC Gamer. A game that wastes its impressive world on formulaic, archaic mission design. User score, 2.5 out of 10. On Steam, the reviews were mostly negative. Players who bought the game described frequent crashes, game-breaking bugs preventing mission completion, boring, repetitive missions, including the dreaded tailing missions that the industry abandoned years ago, generic dialogue and story, 30 frames per second lock on consoles, advertised as 4K 60 frames per second machines, a world that felt empty and sterile. The gameplay was compared unfavorably to games from a decade earlier. One reviewer wrote, "This plays like a PS3 game that was left in a drawer and forgotten." Within 48 hours, players were requesting refunds en masse. PlayStation began issuing refunds, something Sony rarely does for released games. Steam's refund system was flooded. Twitch streamer Co-Carnage, who had been scheduled for a sponsored launch day stream, was instructed by Build a Rocket Boy to cancel it due to the backlash. By launch weekend, MindsEye had become a meme. YouTube videos with titles like "The Worst Game of 2025" and "MindsEye is a Disaster" racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Social media filled with clips of bugs, glitches, and broken gameplay. 1 week after launch, concurrent players on Steam had dropped below 100. Internal projections had estimated 500,000 PC sales in the first month. According to sources with access to internal sales data, MindsEye sold approximately 160,000 units total across all platforms, PC, PlayStation, and Xbox combined. At an estimated $50 to $60 price point, that's roughly $8 to $10 million in gross revenue, against £233 million invested, against 8 years of development, against a team of 448 people at peak. Leslie Benzies had spent more money making MindsEye than Rockstar spent developing the entire Grand Theft Auto 5. GTA 5 generated over $8 billion. MindsEye generated maybe $10 million and couldn't maintain 20 concurrent players within a month. June 13th, 2025, 3 days after launch. Build a Rocket Boy released a statement. "We're heartbroken by the reception. We are prioritizing optimizing the game's performance and stability. Behind the scenes, the studio was in crisis." June 23rd, 2025. Build a Rocket Boy issued "at risk of redundancy" emails to nearly 300 employees, roughly 75% of the UK workforce. The entire studio was facing layoffs. July 2nd, 2025. Leslie Benzies addressed staff for the first time since launch in an all-hands video call. According to 2 sources who attended the meeting, Benzies did not apologize. Instead, he told employees that the negative reception was uncalled for and that internal and external forces had been working against the game. He claimed there were saboteurs, people inside and outside the company deliberately trying to make MindsEye fail. Benzies promised an investigation to identify and root out disloyal employees. 1 week later, layoffs began. By October 2025, approximately 300 people had lost their jobs. Many were experienced developers who'd relocated to Edinburgh for the project. Some had turned down other opportunities to work with Benzies. The BBC asked Build a Rocket Boy for evidence of sabotage. The studio provided none, because there wasn't any. IO Interactive CEO Hakan Abrak, whose company published MindsEye, responded to the sabotage claims publicly. "I don't believe that people were paid to tank this game. You can't blame saboteurs when the product just isn't ready." The developer response was even harsher. October 10th, 2025. 93 former Build a Rocket Boy employees signed an open letter condemning studio leadership. The letter alleged systemic mistreatment and mismanagement, a toxic yes-men culture where dissent was punished, disastrous handling of the redundancy process, leadership refusing to take responsibility for the game's failure. The letter stated employees felt used and discarded after working months of unpaid overtime. That same day, the Independent Workers' Union of Great Britain, IWGB, sued Build a Rocket Boy for mishandling layoffs, claiming the studio violated UK employment law. The financial damage extended beyond the studio. £233 million invested, maybe $10 million returned. Investors who'd bet on Benzies' track record watched their money evaporate. For the Scottish game development industry, the impact was severe. Build a Rocket Boy had been one of Edinburgh's largest studios and a major employer. The layoffs and failure damaged the region's reputation in the global games industry. For Leslie Benzies personally, the damage to his legacy was catastrophic. The man who helped create Grand Theft Auto, one of the most successful franchises in entertainment history, was now best known for MindsEye, 2025's lowest-rated game, a £233 million disaster that couldn't attract 250 players on launch day. And instead of taking responsibility, he blamed ghosts. Did it have to end this way? Other high-profile developers who left major studios proved it didn't. Cyberpunk 2077 launched in December 2020 as one of the most disastrous releases in gaming history. Broken on consoles, pulled from the PlayStation Store, refunds issued en masse. CD Projekt Red's stock price dropped 75%. But CD Projekt Red owned the mistake. They apologized. They spent 2 years fixing the game. They released free updates, major expansions, and transformed Cyberpunk 2077 into what they'd originally promised. By 2023, Cyberpunk 2077 had sold over 25 million copies. Its Phantom Liberty expansion won critical acclaim. The game recovered because leadership took responsibility and committed to fixing it. MindsEye's leadership blamed saboteurs and started layoffs. No Man's Sky launched in August 2016 to catastrophic reviews. Sean Murray had overpromised, the game was incomplete, and players felt betrayed. Peak concurrent players dropped from 212,000 to 7,000 in 3 weeks. Hello Games didn't abandon it. They went silent on social media, not to hide, but to work. For 8 years, they released over 40 major free updates, everything they'd promised and more. By 2024, No Man's Sky had mostly positive reviews on Steam and a dedicated player base. It succeeded because the developers cared more about making it right than protecting their egos. MindsEye's director blamed internal saboteurs and threatened to hunt them down. Grand Theft Auto 5 itself shows what Benzies could do, when he had collaborators who could challenge him. At Rockstar North, Benzies worked with Dan Houser, lead writer, Sam Houser, studio head, and dozens of senior developers who had creative input. GTA 5 was a collaborative masterpiece involving hundreds of people with the power to say no to bad ideas. At Build a Rocket Boy, Benzies had Leslie Tickets, a system where his word was law, feedback was ignored, and developers had to drop everything to implement whatever he wanted that day. GTA 5 generated $8 billion because it was the product of collaborative genius. MindsEye generated $10 million because it was the product of unchecked ego. The pattern was clear. Great games come from teams where everyone has a voice. Failed games come from dictatorships where one person's vision can't be questioned. Leslie Benzies chose dictatorship. What exactly went wrong with MindsEye? The evidence points to 3 critical mistakes. Mistake number 1. He treated £233 million like an excuse to never finish. At Rockstar, Benzies worked under constraints. Budgets had limits. Publishers had deadlines. Teams had schedules. Those constraints forced decisions, forced the game to actually ship as a coherent product. At Build a Rocket Boy, Benzies raised £233 million with minimal oversight. Investors gave him money based on his reputation and left him alone to build his vision. So he built for 8 years without ever deciding what game he was making. Former employee Jamie told the BBC, "Leslie never decided what game he wanted to make. There was no coherent direction." The Leslie ticket system exemplified this. Every day, Benzies would play the game and create new priority tasks, sometimes removing entire missions weeks before launch. Teams couldn't plan, couldn't build momentum, couldn't finish anything because tomorrow, Benzies might decide to change it. One developer described it as constant knee-jerk decisions from upstairs. Compare this to successful independent projects. Hades from Supergiant Games spent years in early access, but director Greg Kasavin had a clear vision from day one. The game iterated based on player feedback, not the director's daily whims. Baldur's Gate 3 spent 3 years in early access, with Larian's Swen Vinke leading a collaborative team. The vision was clear. Stay faithful to D&D 5e rules, create meaningful choices, respect player agency. MindsEye had £233 million and 8 years and never figured out what it wanted to be. The question Benzies should have asked, what is the one thing this game does that no other game does? He never answered it, because he never stopped changing the question. Mistake number 2, he silenced everyone who could have saved him. Great game development is collaborative. Ideas come from programmers, artists, designers, writers, everyone. The director's job is to synthesize those ideas into a coherent vision while staying open to better solutions. Benzies didn't want collaboration. He wanted obedience. Former lead data analyst Ben Newbon said most feedback presented to management was ignored and just never actioned. Developers knew the game wasn't ready. They said so. They were ignored. Former employee Marg told the BBC the team expected MindsEye to receive negative reviews. They knew it was broken, but shipped it anyway because leadership wouldn't listen. This is the opposite of how Rockstar operated. At Rockstar North, Benzies had collaborators who could push back. Dan Houser could challenge his ideas. Sam Houser controlled budgets and deadlines. Senior developers had influence. That friction created greatness. Ideas were tested, challenged, refined. Bad concepts died in pre-production. Good concepts survived because they could withstand scrutiny. At Build a Rocket Boy, Benzies surrounded himself with people who couldn't say no. And when the game failed, he didn't blame his process. He blamed the people he'd silenced. Mistake number 3, he chose ego over accountability. The worst mistake wasn't making a bad game. Studios make bad games. The worst mistake was how Benzies responded when it failed. May 27th, before launch, co-CEO Mark Gerhard claimed negative previews were part of a paid smear campaign. July 2nd, after launch, Benzies told staff that internal and external saboteurs were responsible for the failure. He promised to investigate and root out disloyal employees. Never once did he say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong, this is on me." Compare this to other failed launches. When Cyberpunk 2077 bombed, CD Projekt Red's leadership apologized publicly. "We should have paid more attention to PS4 and Xbox One versions," they said. They took full responsibility. When No Man's Sky launched broken, Sean Murray admitted, We were too ambitious and didn't manage expectations properly. When Anthem failed, BioWare's Casey Hudson wrote, "The weight of this on our studio is immense. I want to acknowledge that our fans deserved better. These studios owned their failures. Then they fixed them, or tried to." Leslie Benzies blamed phantom saboteurs, threatened his staff, and laid off 75% of his workforce while promising to bounce back with a relaunch. That's not accountability, that's delusion. Leadership isn't about being right. It's about accepting when you're wrong, learning from failure, and adapting. Benzies spent £233 million and 8 years learning nothing. Where is MindsEye now? As of January 2026, the game still exists. You can technically still buy it, though almost nobody does. Concurrent players remain in the low double digits on a good day. Build a Rocket Boy is a fraction of its former size. Approximately 100 to 150 employees remain from the peak of 448. The lawsuit from the workers' union is ongoing. The 93 former employees who signed the open letter haven't received the apology or compensation they demanded. Leslie Benzies has gone largely silent publicly. In October 2025, Build a Rocket Boy released a statement saying leadership takes full responsibility for MindsEye's initial launch. But only after the lawsuit, only after the open letter, only after the damage was irreversible. He still hasn't apologized to the staff he accused of sabotage. Everywhere, the ambitious game creation platform that MindsEye was supposed to showcase remains in development with no release date. Investors who sank £233 million into the project are unlikely to see meaningful returns. The lesson here isn't about making a bad game. Every studio makes bad games eventually. The lesson is about ego, collaboration, and accountability. Leslie Benzies helped create Grand Theft Auto because he was part of a team with structure, oversight, creative tension, and people who could tell him no. That friction, that collaboration, produced one of the most successful franchises in entertainment history. At Build a Rocket Boy, he removed all friction. No one could challenge him. Leslie tickets meant his word was law. Feedback was ignored. Concerns were dismissed. And when it failed, he blamed everyone but himself. There are two types of leaders in this industry. Type 1 builds games by building teams. They hire talented people, listen to their ideas, create structure for collaboration, and accept responsibility when things fail. These leaders know that great games come from collective genius, not individual vision. Type 2 builds games as monuments to themselves. They micromanage, ignore feedback, surround themselves with yes men, and blame others when reality doesn't match their vision. Type 1 leaders created Baldur's Gate 3, Hades, Elden Ring, The Witcher 3. Type 2 leaders created MindsEye. The cruel irony is that Benzies was once a Type 1 leader. At Rockstar, he collaborated. He listened. He was part of something bigger than himself. Success made him believe he didn't need anyone else. £233 million and 8 years later, he proved himself wrong. MindsEye isn't just 2025's worst reviewed game. It's a case study in what happens when talent meets ego and ego wins. When someone with a proven track record forgets that their success came from collaboration, not individual genius. The saddest part? 300 talented developers spent years of their lives building MindsEye. Artists, programmers, designers, writers, people who relocated for this project, turned down other opportunities, believed in the vision. They created characters, wrote dialogue, designed environments, crafted missions. Thousands of hours of human creativity. And when it failed, their leader didn't defend them. He accused them of sabotage and fired 75% of them. Leslie Benzies spent £233 million proving he couldn't make Grand Theft Auto without Rockstar. But he only needed to spend his reputation proving he couldn't lead without humility. And that's a lesson you can't relaunch.